offer you about the left side and the right side of the Andean model of the world. You know, and we know that the left side, it does have to do with the mystery. It has to do with creation. That's where the Salk'a resides, the undomesticated energy, that wild energy, you know, the chaos that happens. And the right side having to do with our everyday life, you know, anything that's hierarchical, analytical, any technique, even in the rituals, even the despacho rituals, even meditation, when you use a certain kind of technique. And why is that? It's because you use that technique to move you through to the left side. It's like a doorway, you see. Sometimes it's useful to pay attention to the external world, because the external world will give us a sense of where we are in any given moment. It's what our response is to the external world. If energy being everything, there's a continuum from very, very light energy, and we all know what that feels like, right? When we experience joy or oneness or any of those kind of things, there's a continuum from very light all the way through to heavy energy, you know, feeling depressed and just feeling heavy in the body. I mean, we all know what that is. The left side, and sometimes you remember in the very beginning when we had our first circle and pulled everyone together, and I said that there are going to be things that are happening on a lot of different levels, and they will often be invisible to you. Sometimes we become aware of them and sometimes we don't, but they're still there and they're happening all the time. And while we can be in the left side and be in a bliss state and feel bodiless and all of these kind of things, at the same time you can be on the left side and be sitting just like we are here around the circle and not realize it. See, that's the interesting thing about it. And that's why I'm saying that sometimes it's useful to pay attention to the external world and what the external world presents you with and how you respond to that, what other people tell you that they're noticing, because otherwise we don't even realize it, you know. So if somebody talks to you about the brightness that they see in your eyes or the energy that you're carrying, pay attention to that, you know. And it can even go to the point, I'll tell you a little story. A few years ago, I had a couple of groups back to back, and you know, when you're in the left side that long, you're really in the left side. And so after the second group left, and I was back in Cusco, which is definitely the right side, right? You know, with all the activity and all the input and so on. And I needed to check my emails because that's a lot of the way that I take care of my business. So it just so happened that when we came into town, Inti Raymi was going on. So that's a huge festival where thousands and thousands of people come here from outside. Probably some of you have experienced Inti Raymi, and I mean, throngs and throngs of people in the street. You can hardly move. You know, just masses of people and parades and all of these kind of things. And unfortunately, one of the things that you have to watch is that you really need to watch your money and your passport and your camera and things like that, because there are people that come from outside of Cusco to take advantage of the tourists and so on. So I went into an internet cafe, and of course I was following, you know, all those safeguards, and I had on this green rain jacket, and I had my money and my passport on an inside zipped pocket. And once I got into the internet cafe, I took it off, but I was sitting on it. Okay, so it wasn't going to go anywhere as far as I was concerned. And there were all the throngs of people out in the street, and I'm here with these emails, and I had tons of emails that I needed to take care of. So, there were people that were coming and going, and I kind of, I could see in my peripheral vision and so on, but my focus is on these emails. And at one point, I noticed in my peripheral vision that somebody had come and sat down beside me. But I didn't pay that much attention, and I continued on. And all of a sudden, this voice said, now, a disembodied voice, said, "Look down." I looked down, and even though I was sitting on my rain jacket, the pocket was exposed, and the zipper was open, and my money and my passport were gone. Now, here's what happened. I want you to remember that there are throngs of people in the street. With no thought, absolutely no thought, I was up and I was out onto the street. Now, it's like, where do you go, right? But there was no thought. There was something that told me to turn and go right in to this travel agency next door, where there were people that were lined up, for the services and so forth. And I went right up to these two men, and with pincers of steel, I grasped onto their arms and I said, "My money and my passport, and my money and my passport." And they looked startled, and everybody started looking, and these people, these two guys, they started trying to get away, and they started trying to move toward the door, and I kept saying, "My money, my passport," and I wouldn't let them go. And finally, one of them was able to get away from me, and he slipped out the door. And the other one he slipped out of his jacket and went. And I started to go. And about that time, this woman that was standing there turned to me. She picked something up, and she held it up, and she said, "Are these yours?" And it was my money and my passport. How does that happen?
Teach them to steal from a witch.
So, how does that happen? How does that happen? With throngs and throngs of people, I have absolutely, I don't know what these people look like. I don't, all I know is what I heard, and I began to follow the energy. And that's all I did, you see. Now, that is an example of Salk'a. And being on the left side, and just being in that energy and following it wherever you need to go. Now, this was an unfortunate incident, but it could have ended another way, you see, but it didn't. It didn't at all. Now, there was another time when we were here at Salk'a, and I remember, over the years when Don Martin, he's a Quero elder, would be in the gathering with us, and when we would be doing despacho ceremony, and one of the things that, Don Americo would say that Don Martin was one of his teachers, and that Don Martin's specialty was disappearing. Well, that caught my attention. I mean, And so when I was here one time, I thought, well, I'm going to play with that. I'm going to play with that disappearing. How do you do that? And so I was up in that area over there, but I was sitting right beside a path. And I started playing with that in meditation, just disappearing and kind of losing my skin and blending with the elements. And you know how if you're in deep meditation, you still, or at least for myself, you still have some awareness about what's going on outside, so you can kind of hear the birds and so on. And at one point I heard some footsteps go by. And I finished my meditation and came down, and here are Miracle and Oscar. And they've been looking for me. They've been looking all over for me. And they walked right exactly by where I was sitting meditating, and they didn't see me. I wouldn't have known. that I had succeeded in whatever I had done. And the same is true also for the other incident where, you know, thieves tried to steal from me. I wouldn't have been aware that I was in that state, in that very, very refined energy, unless I had had feedback from the external environment. Does that make sense?
Yes, good point.
You know? Because what happens is, you know, when we're in this body, in each one of our bodies, and we're looking out of our own eyes, it feels pretty natural. Because we're just moving about our daily life. We don't know that. You know.